Good morning, everyone. This is Amanda Allen with NYACP. Thank you all for joining us for Navigating the Financial World with Dr. El-Sayed. We will be starting in just a few moments. If you have any questions or technical difficulties, please go ahead and use the chat. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Amanda Allen with NYACP. Thank you so much for joining us for the Navigating the Financial World webinar this morning. We've got a bunch of people joining, so I'm just going to give a minute or two more, and then we'll go ahead and begin. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Navigating the Financial World with Dr. Chris El-Sayed. My name is Gayatri Bova, and I'm a member of the NYACP Medical Student Committee. Before we begin, I would like to review a couple guidelines. All participants will be on mute since we have a large audience. Please type your questions in the dialog box on the right, and Dr. El-Sayed will answer all questions at the end. If we run over the allotted time, we will email the answers to your questions. Tomorrow, a recording of this webinar will be available for viewing at nyacp.org. And now, NYACP Medical Student Council Board Representative Peter Bandari will introduce Dr. El-Sayed.
Thank you, Gayatri. Dr. Chris El-Sayed is the Division Chief of Primary Care at Nassau University Medical Center in East Meadow, New York. He works on the front lines taking care of patients in addition to precepting and educating the internal medicine residents and medical students. Dr. El-Sayed completed his internal medicine residency at Nassau University Medical Center and thrived in private practice for 10 years, after which he shifted to academic medicine and holds faculty appointments at AUC, NICOM, and Stony Brook, as well as being the AUC Co-Clerkship Director for Medicine. He is a diplomat of the American Board of Internal Medicine, a fellow of the American College of Physicians, and is an active member and Nassau District Counselor for the New York chapter. He is fluent in 4 languages, including Spanish, French, and Arabic, and is currently learning his 5th language, Russian. He obtained an MBA from the Eisenberg School of Management at UMass Amherst to learn the intricacies of finance and to share this knowledge with other physicians. Dr. Elsiad is a champion for patient advocacy and safety. In addition, he enjoys giving lectures and participating in webinars for medical students, residents, and attending physicians in order to help them navigate through the confusing world of finance and contract negotiations. Dr. Elsiad, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for helping us navigate through the financial world.
Thank you so much, Peter, for the kind introduction. This is a subject that is a little bit taboo, but it's something near and dear to everybody's hearts, which is finance. And during our long and arduous journey, educational journey, we have gone through many subjects and courses, but unfortunately for myself and many, many other physicians, many of us did not even take one finance course. And this was kind of my inspiration to obtain an MBA so I can really enhance and enrich my knowledge and also share whatever I have learned over the course of time with other physicians along the way. So let's begin. Okay. So I'm not a financial advisor. Use at your own discretion, please. I don't want anything from you except to be as successful as you possibly can be. So why is this important? A 2013 AMA survey summarized that physicians have spent too little time to spend on personal finances. So some of the key points: 25% of physicians under 40 work on finances every few years. 31% of physicians over 60 are very concerned about retirement. Over 50% of physicians are behind in retirement planning, and 41% of physicians think finances will be worse in 1 year. So this was a relatively terrifying statistic, this last one. You know, with the coronavirus, things are definitely different. They were talking furloughs and other stuff, but during the time of 2013, that should not have been an issue. So something is definitely going on, which physicians are not dedicating the proper time, resources, or energy towards improving their finances. Some points of discussion that we're going to have. We're going to talk a little bit about contracts. We're going to talk about student loans, insurance, which include life and disability, and a different kind of insurance, which is auto, home, and umbrella. Some personal investment tips and some financial pitfalls to avoid. Let's discuss a little bit about contracts. So when you are going for employment or any other kind of thing, the first thing you should really discuss or think of is, what are my expectations? What do these people want from me? So how many days, weekends, and nights? What is exactly expected? And don't be afraid to have people spell things out for you. How many sites am I going to? Well, you're going to be working 7 days. Okay, is that in one institution, 2 institutions? Are you going to be driving in between these places? Is it long? Your time is valuable, and that should be taken into consideration. What else is there besides seeing patients? Am I going to have to precept people, nurse practitioners, physician assistant? Is there other academic things involved? Don't sell yourself short. A lot of times, coming from being a medical student to a resident, you're kind of, you know, what am I bringing to the table sort of thing. You don't know your value. So don't fall into the trap of selling yourself short. Do not say no to other places until the ink is dry. This is very important. We had a resident a couple of years ago who was very interested in going to one institution, and she interviewed with a couple of places beforehand, and then the other place gave her an interview. And before there was anything even written, letters of intent, contracts, she wrote emails to the other 2 places. Thank you so much for your, interest in me, but unfortunately, I'm not able to, etc. But there was nothing even written, and she could have closed those 2 doors and really been in trouble. Thankfully, the place that she wanted did offer her a position, and everything worked out okay. Don't be afraid to ask questions. When someone comes to us and it's for a job or whatever, if you don't have some questions or the proper questions, you're either poorly equipped or something else is kind of happening here. So you have to be ready with a few questions, pertinent ones, that the person who is interviewing you or speaking to you can answer. Salary. Everyone is looking for that big number. Well, if I do this, if I go to this place, whatever the numbers, after Uncle Sam is done with you, whatever small difference there is in the money is not too huge. So, and also a lot of these things are an industry and corporate standard. All right, in X healthcare institution, this is the starting salary for internists, for cardiologists, for whatever, and you kind of go from there. The important question to ask yourself, do you really want that job? And if the answer is yes, then you can ask things, is there any wiggle room? So you're really interested in it, you want to do, say, you know what, I appreciate what you guys are offering and everything. Is there any wiggle room, with the number or any of that stuff? Are there any bonuses involved? Is the bonus based on productivity, or is it a straight salary? Is it seeing X amount of patients, X amount of RVUs, or it doesn't matter, you're going to get X regardless of how many or how little you see? Is the productivity attainable? I once was interviewing for a position at a highly reputed place, and they were opening up a new clinic, a new office, and one of these bonuses was based on the lab getting Department of Health certification. Now that was something I had nothing to do with, so I didn't know, is this like a carrot dangling in front of me, or was it a slam dunk? So these are questions that you have to kind of ask and be aware of. And finally, something you should never say, probably to yourself and definitely not out loud to anybody, I'm not good at this stuff, negotiating salary. Doctors love to, I don't know whether it's taking a different, ego thing or whatever. All I know is medicine. I don't know anything about business. And that is a terrible point of view. You have to educate yourself as much as you can. So try to learn a little bit about things and go along with it. The limitations of contracts. So there is something called a restrictive covenant, which basically limits somebody from working within a certain radius for X amount of years. So on a personal note, when I was in private practice, it was wonderful. It was on the handshake. A big corporation came and took over the office, and the contracts came out, and they wanted to do five miles for like 10 miles, I'm sorry, for 5 years, which is huge on Long Island. So it's going to drive you all the way out east or all the way to Queens. It's fine if you want to be there, but it really drives you out of a place. And that was kind of the deal breaker. And some people say, you know what, restrictive covenant is illegal. And from all the research I've done, that is absolute nonsense. The only way that they can't uphold a restrictive covenant is if you're the only transplant surgeon or only one kind of specialty in that particular area of the state or area where it can cause patient harm. So if that's not the case, they can go after you with it. And in this particular case, the penalty was $1,000 a day, which is ridiculously prohibitive. So also, is this restrictive covenant to one office or hospital, or is it all of them? You're working at Clinic A. Is it going to be 10 miles from Clinic A and Clinic B, which overlap and push everyone away? So that can be very problematic. The duration, as we said as well, is it for X amount, 3 years, 5 years? Typically, they're around 3 years or so. If you really like the place and you want to do it, but the restrictive covenant is scaring you a little bit away, you can negotiate a little bit. So you can tell the person, listen, can you please append the contract a little bit to decrease the radius and the years, and they may be able to do something. No moonlighting. Moonlighting is basically when you have a full-time job and you're going out in your days off working somewhere, the ER, another institution, different parts of that institution, etc. Many of these big healthcare organizations now, Kaiser and all these people, do not want moonlighting. Why? You're paying somebody to work 7 days, 7 off, for example. During those 7 days off, I want you to rest. I want you to get yourself together. So when you come on for your 7-day on shift, I don't want you to be exhausted, making mistakes, and that's going to drive up everybody's med mal, etc. So that's something that needs to be considered as well. Some places just have a competitor clause, not a restrictive covenant. You know what? You're working for McDonald's. We don't want you to go to Wendy's across the street. You're working for our, we don't mind wherever you go, just don't go to our main competitor. Good. So a little bit more details that should be looked at in the contract. Time off. Exactly how much time off am I getting? Am I required to answer emails on my time off? Is it complete time off? Thanks to these wonderful smartphones and everything, you can't kind of escape the job. However, you have to have a little bit of that recuperation time without any repercussions, etc. Another thing they offer to new applicants is a moving bonus. They may say, you know what, we're going to offer you X amount of dollars, and that is going to be for your moving bonus. So I've had some residents tell me, you know what, I really don't have much. I have some, junk furniture and this and that. So I say, listen, donate it, give it away, and you can offer the hospital, say, okay, you want to give me 10,000 for a moving bonus? How about this? Let's cut it in half. You give me 5,000, the hospital gets to keep 5,000, and everybody wins. And time again, people, institutions have taken advantage of it and appreciate the business savviness of the physician who they're being involved with. Other things, are you overseeing other providers? Are you responsible for a PA or a nurse practitioner? Which means you have to go through their charts and make sure the proper medical care is being given. That takes time. It's not just, okay, you're clinical and sign off on their duties, their privileges, etc. Things need to be evaluated, which takes time. Administrative duties. Do you have to do evaluations, resident evaluations, letters of recommendation? All those kind of things will certainly take time, and they should be taken in the general picture. Tail insurance. Tail insurance is when you are leaving the job and God forbid someone later on decides, one of the patients that you saw decides to bring some kind of litigation, but you already left the job. So tail insurance will cover you for X amount of time after leaving that job and will protect you. So who is going to pay for it? Some employers will pay for it, but most will not. And that's where you have to kind of see, is it worth spending X amount of dollars for the tail insurance for that 3 to 5 years of coverage for any kind of liability that comes in. Finally, with any of this stuff, if you looking at it, you having people look at it is wonderful. But if you still feel uncomfortable paying that small fee or whatever amount to have a contract attorney take a look and make sure you are not signing, a bad deal, which will cost you a lot of money in the future and a lot of headache, is not a terrible idea. All right, a wonderfully fun subject, loans, which everybody has and everybody carries. So some do's and don'ts that we're going to discuss. Research the lowest rate possible and consolidate. You're going to try to use a government lender if possible over private. Just as a small aside, I look at some of these other financial quote unquote specialists and everything for physicians, and they have so many of these links to go for these loans. And the big thing, oh, sign with our loan, $300 bonus, $500 bonus, an iPad. That money is not being given out just because of their good graces. That means they are going to make a hearty amount of money from you. So the most that you could do to find a government lender with the lowest amount, the lowest rate possible would be in your benefit. Build equity, save some money when you can. This will improve your credit score when it comes time to buy your house, your car, etc. It is going to look better. And the secret, as they always say about that book, The Millionaire Next Door, you don't necessarily have to get a new car every new year, few years. You want like a steady and climbing life. You want that graph to go up and up over the years so your finances will improve year in and year out. Some don'ts. Do not default. Defaulting on the loan and any other kind of payment is terrible for your credit score and looks terrible in general. That's why when people say just pay the minimum, yes, if you have to, just pay the minimum because it will not register as a default. People get very upset. You know what? I'm carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. It's like an invisible house, but it paid for your education. So don't get upset. It's like a mortgage. It's going to be there for a while. You're going to pay it off and you're going to be fine with it. Do not dump all of your assets. People say, you know what? I'm going to work like crazy. I'm going to dump all of my money into the loan as much as I can. Here's the problem. Something happens to you. You get ill. You have a need for money. You're stuck because you dumped all of your cash into paying that loan off for a few years earlier, but now you need some equity. So you don't have a nest egg. You don't have a safety net. You don't have some kind of money in the bank. And the money in the bank, as we said, improves your credit score and makes you look good. Don't go full rock and roll, no showing off or anything, but you've certainly sacrificed enough that you should enjoy your life a little bit. Insurances. So some professional insurance, and I'm a big fan of, after searching, organizational discounts, the AMA, the ACP, they will probably give you the best rates, and you should always shop around, compare apples to apples. Disability insurance. So it basically comes down to how much coverage do you want per month? 3,000, 5,000, more? I mean, you have to calculate, okay, the mortgage of the house is going to be this and that if something happens. So within reason. Remember, the higher amount of money that you want to get as disability, it's going to cost you a lot more. Some disability places have different criteria. What is the criteria for disability? Do you have to be fully disabled? Or can they say, well, you're not able to practice medicine, but you can teach. So we're gonna, fight it out with you. Insurance companies are more than happy to collect your premium, but when it comes time to pay out, that's where they give you all kinds of headaches. And a caveat, it is preferable to obtain disability insurance outside of your workplace. If they give it to you for free, terrific. But if it's something that you're going to spend money on, which you should outside of the organization, it is quite preferable, because once your workplace gets involved, they can say, you know what, we want you to come back to work, we want you to do this and that. This can be a little bit of the trickiness. So I would definitely obtain it outside of the workplace. Your personal insurance, life, and also through organizations. Life insurance, there are two kinds of life insurance, whole and term. Whole is typically a little bit of the older style and much more expensive. They used to call it like a forced savings. However, if you're able to put some money aside, do a little investing and maximize your opportunities, you don't need anyone to force the savings for you. So the great majority of people now do term insurance, which is X amount of years. We're going to start from this age, and it's going to go for 15, 20, 30. You should typically go for the maximum amount, because as you are doing it, you are at a young age, hopefully healthy, and you can maximize as much as you can. Once you get close to the end of that term, you could talk about redoing it again or canceling it completely. Some people say, you know what, they got it at 35, by 65, hopefully your kids will find your career, the house is paid off, etc. And some people will say, you know what, I want a small policy just in case to cover the situation. Personal insurance, you are seen as a potential target. Make no mistake. You, with your initials after your name, you are seen as somebody having a couple of bucks, and there's a lot of people in society that want a piece of that action. I always dreamt when I was a student and everything that I would have MD plates on my car and all this other stuff. And as I went on and as I saw what was out there, I realized it was not such a great idea. So I avoided that. Kind of go under the radar, if you will. Home insurance limits. You have people coming to your house or whoever, somebody falls. They want lawsuits, liability, whatever. So you have to do things in accordance. Same as the car insurance. You're driving, your spouse, your kids, whoever. There should be a certain increased limit within reason that will cover any kind of issues. There is something called an umbrella policy that will cover all of these things. God forbid someone has an accident, it passes the limit of the car insurance. So now they want to go after your house or go after other of your personal assets, and the umbrella policy will cover that. Typically, you should start with $1 million, which sounds like a lot, but unfortunately in today's day and age, it is not a lot, but that at least will cover. Valuables. People have certain jewelry, watches, etc. that they want to cover. Homeowner insurance will cover, should cover a certain percent of it. Again, you should call and be sure. However, they have riders that you can add onto it to cover those valuables. And as I keep saying, be humble and always try to do the right thing. Budgeting. How much of the pie should you cut up to where? So this is our pie. This is a classic 50-30-20 budget, one of the major budget ways that things are split up. And we're going to discuss and see which each piece of the pie and how much you could shrink and increase them. So what's the breakdown? 50% of it goes to essentials. These are your needs: grocery, housing, utilities. You need to live, you need to eat, you need to turn your light bulbs, your air conditioning, your heating, and you need to get where you're going, your transportation. 30%, your fun and your wants. Your cable, your Netflix, shopping, you want to work out is great. Hobbies, vacations, okay? These are things that you want, they're things that make you sane and happy, and 30% typically of your budget should be dedicated to this. Financial goals, 20%. And people say, my gosh, how much should I be putting to my student loans? This is a conglomeration. You take 20% of your take home, and it should be between your savings, retirement, loans, and emergency fund. You must develop some kind of emergency fund. So as you split up that 20% of the pie towards the emergency fund, your savings, and that money, some of that money should also be going towards your student loans. If you have credit card debt, retail debt, that should be one of the number one things that you pay off, because that is a mafia-like VIG, as they say, vigorage, interest rate that should be paid off as soon as possible. Student loans, you're going to keep paying them, pay at least the minimum, please. All right, investing. So a little bit of financial factoids. Americans hold more debt in credit card and loans than their savings. This may hold true now, but should hopefully change over time for physicians. You are hanging on to a lot of debt as a student, a resident, a new attending, and even midlife attending. When you owe 3, 4, 500,000 or whatever in debt, it's going to take time to pay that off. However, if you keep following the principle of saving your money, paying off the loan, then hopefully over time, this savings should outweigh the debt factor. A little bit of financial factoids. I was discussing with a friend in economics the other day. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. People say, well, what about, when you take the time and consideration? Wrong. There is constant depreciation of the money. Think about in 1960, how much a dime bought you. People would tell you the stories of buying 3 hot dogs, going on the subway, and all these other things. And now we know exactly how much a dime is worth. So today, $1 is worth more than tomorrow. Inflation, which we may end up seeing a little bit more of, leads to depreciation of the money. And you see that with a lot of the currencies around the world. The money to dollar just keeps going more and more X of there to the dollar, and it depreciated. After many wars, they used their currency, for toilet paper and all these other things because the money was useless. The key is to invest early and make your money work for you as early as you possibly can. Well, I'm just a resident. I'm only making X amount. Pay a little bit of the loan off. Pay a little bit of, have some kind of little saving investment, and it's going to help you later on in life. It's hard to have that foresight, but I just want you to start thinking about these things. As interest rates climb, the stock markets drop. Even though we are seeing a little bit of the opposite of that, the interest rates are going down. Why? Because they want people to put their money in the stock market to help that increase a little bit. However, if we take the example of interest rates that are climbing, there's an indirect and direct effect. Credit card rates, loans go up, people have less disposable income. People are running X amount of thousands on their MasterCard. Now, when it becomes a lot more, they don't have a lot more of that disposable income, so they're spending less at restaurants and venues and places. The direct effect is businesses borrow money. Instead of that $1 million at 5%, now you're talking 7, 8%. That money is going out more to paying the interest. So this decreases the P&E, the profits and earnings, and will decrease the amount of people hired and new ventures that these businesses want to do. So this is the effect of interest rates that has on the businesses. Investment strategies. This is the first part here I have had with mid-career attending physicians. It's funny. You must max out your 401k from go. Whatever Uncle Sam leaves you after they get done with it is going to be minimal compared to the pre-tax money. So 401k is pre-tax. You must max out every penny into the 401k account. If you have X amount that you could put in a year, and that's the maximum, as it goes up a little bit every year. However, once you have that in there, the money keeps cooking. Okay, you maxed out your 401k. What's next? You want to invest a little bit of money? You can start an account with a brokerage house. Whoever you think is appropriate for you or has good relationship perhaps with family or somebody, and you can do, now everything is online. It's magnificent. You don't have to have the guy or whoever, you're under their mercy for the information. Should you buy individuals or funds? Typically, the general consensus is you find low fee funds, things like Spider, QQQ, etc. What does it mean, low fee funds? When you have a fund of multiple different things, you have someone managing this fund, and they are going to charge you money. Their time is not free. So when you look things up and see what is the fees that they charge in comparison, the internet was going to tell you, a lot of these sites are going to tell you this is a high fee fund. And unless they have a crazy good return, those are things that you want to try to avoid. So low fee funds are kind of where it's at. Combo funds, which usually have bonds, stocks, and cash and other things, they will typically cushion. If the stocks drop, the bonds will go up. So that will kind of help cushion that blow. Some things are pure stocks, and when the stock market is zooming up, terrific. But when you have drops like it's going on in today's day and age, you should have something that's a little bit combined. Diversity is key. And one of the examples is FF Knox that Fidelity has. It's a little bit of everything. Okay, so it'll cushion it if it goes down, and the bonds will go. Set it and forget it. We don't have time to look at stocks every other day or trade them. You can look at it and see how your things are doing and everything, and buy and sell occasionally. Selling, I wouldn't even do unless you really, really have to. Where you say, well, it dropped so much and everything. You didn't really lose money technically unless you sold the stock. So a lot of times the advice is to just leave it as much as you can. You're going to be busy with work. You don't have time to tweak so much of your portfolio. So you want to buy things that are going to sit and are going to keep reinvesting. Things that, for example, have dividends. They give you $10 a quarter, $10 a year. Take that $10 and please buy more of that share. And before you know it, there was a study like a while ago or something they did about someone with Coca-Cola in either the 50s or the 60s. And if they bought X amount of stock and sold it, they made X amount of thousands. If they bought X amount of stock and they just got the dividends of it, they made thousands. But if they bought the stock and reinvested the dividends in the stock, the number went up exponentially. So you want to buy it, let it sit there, and just keep having it buy itself, which will buy more shares. If you have children, many states have a state tax deductible plan. Our own state of New York has a 529 plan, newyorksaves.org, which you can contribute as much as you want. However, it's only up to $10,000 state deductible, which is a very good number. State taxes are usually very, very strong, and you end up most of the time paying them. However, if you put some of this money in, it's good for the kids, it's good for you because it's state tax deductible. Real estate. Sometimes when you go in with people, for example, you want to buy a four apartment building in one of these places, you don't have too much of the time to manage it. So you may end up paying a managing partner or someone who will take care of all the headaches. I don't want to deal with my own house's problems. Last thing I want to do is get a call at 2 a.m. about somebody's boiler or whatever. So sometimes that happens. One thing I would definitely avoid is to buy a shared home to live in. I've seen this quite a few times over the years. People think they're smart. I don't want to pay rent, so my boyfriend and I, my girlfriend and I, my friend and I, whomever, we're going to buy a house, we're going to split the mortgage, and then we're going to do all this other stuff. However, things turn sour. Then all of a sudden you separate from this loved one and stuff, or you're not friends with this person anymore. And all you want to do is get out of that relationship at all costs. So you end up losing a little bit of money and, more importantly, getting a lot of the headache versus just having some kind of lease that you can either break or finish or whatever. So it's not really advised to buy a home to do so. And keep it legitimate. You're going to have a lot of people that come to you and say, oh, I got a great business venture for you. So remember, as a physician, you're a target for some of these things, and you want to try to keep your business ventures as legitimate as possible. Some of the pitfalls that we have so that you can have to avoid: living like a rock star, okay? Having too much of this, you lived, I hate to say oppressed, but you've sacrificed a lot to go through medical school, to go through residency. And unless you really come from a family with a silver spoon, the financial situation was a little bit tough for sure. You're living in loans, you're not generating any income. So this is something that some people, they just pop when they get that first paycheck and they just start buying everything. You can always outspend what you make. And that's something you should always tell yourselves. You know what? Well, he's making the hundreds or whatever. You can always outspend that amount. So take your time. Timeshares, thanks to this new world of Airbnb, timeshares have pretty much gone the way of the dodo, if you will. There's a lot of companies out there who want to take that timeshare off your hands, of course, at a lovely penalty. And it's generally recommended in financial world to avoid buying any timeshares. Another pitfall: trying to time the market. Well, I'm going to wait till it drops a little bit and I'm going to buy the thing now and whatever. It's been shown that steady investing in the market has the best kind of return. So you put X amount a month, or you got your bonus and you put X amount, or you have a little bit extra and you keep going and keep investing. That's what's going to give it to you. Crazy car leases. It's the same with the rock star. You know what? He wants the top of this or she wants the top of that. Be reasonable. Yes, you've earned that nice car. You've earned that whatever, but within reason. Do not overstretch your finances, because that's going to make things very difficult for you. Same goes for having expensive rents and houses. People get all these crazy exotic apartments, or they have these tremendous sized house and you become house poor. You're working only to make that mortgage and the car lease and everything. And in the end, that leads to a little bit of frustration because all that disposable income that you should have to do other things and, enjoy yourself are gone because they're all to the house and to the car. Or worst thing, you can even default on some things which make you look terrible. Bad investments. Penny stocks generally are not an encouraged economic venture, financial venture. Almost everybody loses money unless they know what they're doing, unless they're selling them. So that is something you want to avoid. Someone says, oh, I have a great idea for this penny stock. I would stay away. Go for the legitimate funds and stocks, and that would typically help you generate your revenue. Family friend with loans, all of a sudden people come out of the woodwork. It's like, oh, sort of like winning the lotto, but however, you have a little bit better excuses. People will come out, somebody's brother-in-law, somebody's whatever, is in a little bit. Don't loan any money unless you're willing to consider it as a gift. That's like a famous kind of saying sort of thing. So you have an excuse to say, you know what, my money is really all tied up in my loans or it's tied up in the market. Also, once you loan once, that door is kind of open. It is not unheard of for that person to come after a month, 6 months, a year, and say, you know what, I really appreciate your help for this, this, and this. However, I can use a little bit of something. So before you start opening up that situation, you really need to rethink exactly what you're doing. Not saving your money. Plenty of people over time, oh boy, you know what? I work so hard and this and that. I just want to enjoy and spend. You have to save. Something happens to you, you're going to be in trouble, to a family member, to whatever. If there's a business venture or something that you need to have some money to put out or something that looks interesting, not having any money for it is not going to help you. A big thing also, not doing the research or due diligence. Nowadays, with the interwebs and all the other good stuff, there are certainly many opportunities and media outlet that you can check and keep investigating for things. You're not just dependent on that one person, the stockbroker, whoever, that told you years ago, this is a winner or whatever. Research the heck out of it. Don't be embarrassed to look and take a look. Some other tips, as we said, specialty organizations are pretty good for disability and life. I compared all of them from every private company to our medical organizations, and they proved to be the winners. They are also a good resource to find mentors, to find financial mentors. Doctors will tell other doctors, you know what, I took a bath on this. Don't get involved in this X, Y, and Z. Perhaps sometimes because they're not financially savvy, but it is something to put in your ear and say, you know what, I've heard this before. This is not a good idea to do. I'm going to go with some caution here, with some trepidation to see what we can do. Insurance discounts are there because typically physicians are preferred low risk audience. You're not exactly going to do stunts on a motorcycle or start smoking 2 packs a day or all these other things. So that is where the lower prices for all these insurances come from. You can do it. You're in one of the top fields because of your hard work, your interest, your dedication, and everything. You must do your financial research. Don't be afraid to ask when you're going for interviews or going to speak with financial advisors or whatever. Okay? No, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to whatever. And these people will stroke your ego. Well, doctor, this is really a whatever, whatever. Let's put all that business aside. Money is money. Finance is finance. This is where you need to toughen up and kind of take it seriously and put your ego aside, which is very difficult for people to do. But for you to be financially successful, you must do it sometimes. Have a plan. So you are a different person, a different financial level when you're a student, a resident, a new attending, attending perhaps with a family, attending close to retirement, etc. So as you go down life and your career, your needs and your financial interests and that pie will change a little bit. So as you get to things, your plan has to be a little bit dynamic. And it's not a subject people want to talk about or go through, but you should certainly do it. So have yourself a plan, stick to it as much as possible. And finally, start early. It's never too soon to save. It's never too soon to pay a little bit of that loan off. You don't want to pay the loan off, at least, don't default and have a little bit of investing, because before you know it, it's going to be 5 or 10 years down the line, and whatever minimal amount that you put in there will grow exponentially. And that's it. Thank you all and good luck. And I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Yes, we do. This is Amanda Allen with NYACP. Thank you so much, Dr. Al-Sayed. I feel actually much more confident just listening to that. So I hope everyone else does as well. We've got a few questions coming in. The first one goes back to the tail insurance. The attendee was wondering if you're past the covered term and are working with a new employer, who covers the lawsuit? So for example, the tail insurance is for 3 years. Someone brings a suit against you 4 years after you leave, and you're now working at another place. Would that come under the new employer's insurance or your umbrella policy?
It does not come under the new employer. Whatever happens with the new employer at their facility, they are responsible for. Your previous ventures and medical care is on you, and that's where it starts to get a little bit controversial between your old office or old institution and you. So they have to see A, what's the statute of limitations, and B, how much of the tail is going to cover that. So it does not fall under the new employer.
Okay, thank you. The next question I think will help summarize some things that we learned during the webinar, during your presentation. So realistically, what do finances look like as far as paying back student debt quickly during and after residency? I know we talked about, you talked about definitely, not putting everything into that, but realistically, what are we looking at for payback, paying that back over time? How long? Et
I
cetera.
mean, that's also going to depend on the principal. Someone who has 200,000 in loans is different than 500,000 or more. So the duration of it is going to be dependent on the principal, the number that you have to pay back. How much more should you pay back? I think that's going to be what you're comfortable and afforded with. For example, when you take out a 30-year loan on a home, they typically say if you do one extra payment to the principal. Now, this is something important. A lot of people throw it to their escrow or throw it to the interest or whatever. If you put that money, as you always should, to the principal on a 30-year loan, it will cut down from 30 to 22 years. So I believe it has a little bit of a similar effect on the student loans. If you're able to add a little bit more money than to the principal, it should cut down the duration of the student loan.
That's a great tip. And I think that actually leads into the next question. At what point then do we go from money towards debt, so paying towards that principal, to money for savings and investments? I know you said save from the beginning, but is there a shift where you're going more towards savings or more towards paying that principal?
I think it also depends how much of that. Now, we said that's 20% of your budget. So if you kind of feel that you've maxed out a little bit on investments and you don't want to invest, this, for example, is a little bit of volatile times in the market as we see. This is also, some people say, a good time to buy because a lot of the stocks are low and typically stock market should return to where it is. So if you don't feel comfortable during this time or during volatile times investing money, maybe you can put a little bit more of that money towards your student loans. But as we said, you should always have that nest egg and the savings to be sufficient, more than just putting all that extra money towards the principal.
Great, thank you. And we have one last question. You talked about researching and make sure that we don't rely on one person and to go ahead and research for ourselves. What recommendations can you make for your go-to sites or reliable sources that you like to use?
I typically compare a few of them. I like Morningstar, Yahoo Finance is pretty good, and Fidelity is also pretty good. You want to have the different thing. A lot of times you want to see how many stars they have. Sometimes they're 5-star funds, which are good, means it's low amount of management fees and it has a good return on it and everything. I would just compare. If you are thinking of this, also look at the history of the stock or the fund. Does it look like something that's going up steady? Everyone has a wonderful tip from whomever. However, sometimes they kind of fall flat. And also patience is a big factor. You're going to invest in a stock or a fund. Don't be too eager or too eager to sell rather, or too impatient, because that can lead to some drastic decisions. So I would say compare a few of them, but those are my 3 big ones: Fidelity, Morningstar, and Yahoo Finance.
Great, that's much appreciated. I think that'll help all of us get started in something that can seem really overwhelming. So that's really helpful. Those are all the questions that have come in. Gayatri?
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you so much, Dr. Elsiad, for the presentation. I think especially what you said about balancing finances around loan repayments is something that's not intuitive and something that early career physicians will need long after they graduate. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I would just like to remind you all that the webinar recording will be available on nyacp.org. I hope everyone has a great day. Please stay safe.